James Ham in. James, I don't know if you guys have talked about this on the Insiders. Have you guys kind of, dug a little deep about some of the weird stories behind the Shohei Ohtani thing?
Yeah, there's too much weirdness coming out right now. I think everyone should be a little concerned. I saw a thread earlier on some internet sleuth who's gone through and found bets that were placed in this city, like at some point for a huge
Mm.
amount of money. And then you look at Shohei, what he was supposed to do that night, and none of it makes sense. And you're
So,
but
so
I don't know. Like,
somebody's
look,
somebody's tying it to baseball because everything that I've read and watched, even the guys who are, kind of like have a side eye of it, they're like, no, I don't think he did anything with baseball. It was more so like soccer in Japan or something like that. But somebody now they're trying to tie it to baseball, huh?
well, I mean, like, look, this is a one thing that you can control. If you're a gambler, it's one
Mhm,
thing that you can control.
mhm,
Like, you can control how you bat in a game. You
mhm.
can control how many runs you give up in a game. And I don't even think, I don't know, like, look, Pete Rose has been banned from baseball for life for for gambling,
Mhm.
and like there should be heavy scrutiny on this. You should be looking at everything, turning over every stone, and making sure that whatever he's saying, whatever his guy is saying, is all on the up and up. Because if not, again,
Well, well, I'm asking you, James, who should be doing that? Because I'm going to ask you, maybe me and you, maybe Jeff Passan. If I'm Rob Manfred, do I want to know everything? This is
well,
the biggest star in my game. Do I want to know everything? Do I maybe have a private meeting and say, stop what you're doing if you're doing anything? I'm not going to investigate. I'm not going to go any further because that does not help me out at all. I'm just going to tell you if you're doing something, stop it.
okay, well, first of all, we're not dealing with an everyday average commissioner. We're dealing with one of the biggest morons professional sports has ever seen. I mean, this guy is a boob
You're not
of
lying.
epic proportion. He is realistically just in the pockets of the owners and does nothing good for the game at all. He's literally one of the worst commissioners in the history of the game.
Mm,
I don't think he'll go down that path, but that doesn't mean someone else isn't going to go down that path.
right,
Because,
right.
like, look, this thing to expose not only, hey, look, this is one of those things where you better keep your hands off if you're the commissioner. You better stand down because you'll get rolled up into this thing, and just like everybody else will. And these are like the money that commissioners get paid. First of all, is stupid. Like, what are we doing paying these guys this much money? That doesn't make any sense. Like,
Right,
again, Goodall it was making more than the highest paid player, the highest paid quarterback early on. Like,
right.
none of that makes any sense at all. So, like, look, if it comes out in the wash that that's what's happened here, that Shohei is dirty, hey, look, man, bye, see ya.
Mm,
I don't care what kind of generational talent you are. It's the
mm,
same thing. I have the same opinion of the steroid era. Like, look, baseball of all the sports is all about the stats. It's all about the record books. And if you violate that, then you should not be allowed in. You shouldn't be on the field, and you shouldn't be allowed in the Hall of Fame, and you should be as far away from the sport as possible. So, to me, again, a bit of a baseball purist here. I just, we what we don't have right now is
mm,
the right guy at the helm to handle a situation like this. This
mm,
guy is not a good commissioner. He's not a steward of the game. He
mm.
is a troll, just like A's ownership. And like, look, I hope this isn't something that unfolds, and we're not seeing one of the greatest players that's ever stepped on a baseball diamond go down like this. But if that's what happens, like, you reap what you sow.
Mm. See, and I first of all, we're having fun with it. I don't think Otani bet on baseball. I really don't. I think he may have a gambling problem. Like everything points to he knew what was going on. He may have a gambling problem, and it may be outside of baseball. I don't think he bet on baseball. But what you mentioned about the steroid era and everything else like that, I think because you can pinpoint a whole lot, you can't be selective with your penalizing. So what I mean by that is there were rumors that Pudge Rodriguez was on the juice. You don't know. He got in. So we'll just use obviously the most famous example. How are you going to punish Barry Bonds?
Okay, so like I didn't know this is where our discussion would go today because I have very strong opinions as a
Yeah,
non-Giants fan about
yeah,
Barry Bonds. So first of all, everyone wants to like pinpoint that moment where Barry Bonds started using and I mean it's obvious, right? His head swells up like a watermelon. He can't miss a baseball. He's hitting everything that's anywhere near the plate over the fence. Like
mm,
you can see a moment where it's crazy, right? And everyone, well, but he was all Hall of Famer before that. And then I would just like rewind and tell you that I think like most of us understand like once a cheater, always a cheater. Like there's nothing to say he wasn't juicing in college and that he was just using other stuff that didn't nearly have the same effect that it did down the road. But
mm,
there's nothing to say because it was so prevalent in the college game at that point. If you wanted to make it to the bigs, almost everyone knew that you had to use the juice. And, I have friends that played baseball, high level college baseball during that time. And, they sat there and made pledges to each other and say, hey, we're not going to juice. We're not going to juice. And then you come back from, a break and, your catcher has gained 35 pounds of muscle and has acne everywhere and goes on to get drafted into Major League Baseball.
mm.
So, like, look, there is no beginning date. That's my point because you can't tell me that he was clean the whole time. And so with Bonds, like I just have a tough time like giving him any pass at all. And I get that there are some players that shouldn't be in that we probably will find out later or maybe we'll never find out. Even in Big Poppy, like there was rumors that he was on like the big report back in like 2003, all that stuff. Like look, at
So
at
but
some
that's my point though, James, because you said it perfect. There is no beginning date. So if that's the case, there should be no more baseball Hall of Fame because you
mm,
don't know when it started, who was doing it. I mean, what are greenies? You know what I'm saying? There's stories about steroid use throughout sports back in the 60s and 70s.
well, I mean,
So
look at all the
because
Raiders defensive linemen that just flat out died of brain cancer. Lyle Alzado, John Matuzak, guys that just juiced and juiced and juiced and then died horrible, horrible deaths.
yeah. So
Like
so that's
specifically.
my
So
but that's what I'm saying because you hit the nail on the head. There is no beginning date. So you either say, hey, we don't know a beginning date and we're going to treat everything on the up and up and bring people in, even in that steroid era, or you don't have the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I can also tell you, it probably hasn't stopped. So, like to think that steroid use or performance enhancing has stopped and like we're out of it, and now these people are going to be able to be in the Hall of Fame, that's a flawed way of thinking as well. So, if you're not, my whole thing is if you're not going to just stop the Hall of Fame, you can't penalize select people.
yeah, I mean, I guess there is, sort of okay, you remember the movie The Big Hit with Mark Wahlberg years ago?
Mm.
Um, yeah, and they had the Trace
I'm not a
Buster.
movie guy.
Okay, so they had the Trace Buster, and so they were trying to make a call for, I think they were trying to make a call for ransom, right? And then the other
Mm,
guy had a Trace Buster. You know what I mean? So we have
yeah,
this like, so I get what you're saying. Like we're never going to be able to figure out. Like, so I guess my point is, you're right. Like what we see now is you can see masking agents, right?
mm,
But are we to the point where they can mask the masking agents? And I think the
yeah,
the answer is probably yes.
yeah,
But here's the problem. It's that when you have a guys like again, Bonds is like such a prime example where he gets to an age where most players start to go downhill and then all of a sudden he's yacked and he's hitting home run after home run after home run and he snaps with a normal like like graph, right? It's like you when you had your son, you
Mhm.
brought him in, he's in the 90 percentile in height. He's in the 88 percentile in height. He's in the 92nd percentile in height. You can basically draw a string and see how tall he's going to be by where he was at certain points in his life.
Mhm.
If you had that, and then all of a sudden you get to like, I don't know, you're matching your height and your wife's height, and then you get to age 14 and he grows a foot and a half and breaks every single chart ever, you're going to be scratching your head, aren't you? Like, what's going on here, honey? Like,
Mm.
we had a really tall mailman. Like, what is going on here? Right. So that my point is like you can't just excuse Barry Bonds for literally going out and trying to break the record books by cheating because hey, everybody's doing it. I mean, what he was able to do after an age where he wasn't supposed to be able to do that anymore. And it's the same with Roger Clemens. I mean, Roger Clemens is the other prime example where Roger Clemens was so great when he was young. He gets
Mhm.
to a certain point and he's done. He's shot. We all saw it. We all saw him take the standard, like, starts to fall apart. His ERA starts to spike. He starts becoming a sub 500 pitcher and he's over and he's done with. And then out of nowhere, he bulks up and goes on to win 4 Cy Youngs? Like, come on. That's to me, it's just a mockery. It's a mockery of the game. And that's where I kinda draw the line. It's like, look, I can't excuse what's happening there. And just like you can't excuse all of these guys who, again, Rafael Palmeiro hitting, look at his stats after the age of like 32. It's
Mm.
just the most egregious, gaudy thing you've ever seen. And like, look, sure, baseball, the pitchers were probably juiced. And so
That's
maybe he was getting
sure.
more fastballs. Like, there's a lot to it, but that doesn't mean we just excuse the whole thing.
But
It's
we
kind of like,
do because you talk about a guy like Bonds who got better at the end of his career when everybody was falling off. And this is just conversations that people have had and rumors that are out there. I don't know. I'm not accusing. But by all intents and purposes, Mike Piazza shouldn't have been in the league. And he juiced and became a Hall of Fame catcher and one of the greatest off. He was what, the 67th round he was picked as a favor to Tommy Lasorda.
yeah,
He,
something
he
crazy.
was on nobody's radar. All of a sudden, he becomes this jacked catcher who is one of the most prolific offensive catchers the game has ever seen. My point is saying he was 67th round pick for a reason, and all of a sudden he becomes a Hall of Famer. So that's not the end of his career. That's the fact of if he was allegedly, if he was clean, he wouldn't even have been in there. And he's a Hall of Fame guy. With nobody says nothing. He's in the Hall of Fame. It's good. We celebrate Mike Piazza. Nobody says anything. But this situation, we got to do all this song and dance about.
Yeah, I mean, I get you. There is no like fair line where we know what was real at what time and what wasn't. And Piazza is probably a really good example of that. But you just,
Let them
I,
all in, James. Let
I
them
don't think you
all
just let them all in, man. I don't think you just let. If you're gonna let them all in, you might as well let Pete Rose back in too.
and let them
And
in. Let Pete Rose in. And part of the
yeah,
reason why you let them all in is because not you, Major League Baseball, you were compliant in all this. You knew what was going on. So do not have a moral high ground now. All
no,
you
I
guys
get
knew
you.
what was going on.
Yeah,
And you made money off of it just like the players did. So let's not be, morally right at this point. Let these guys in. And but I mean, it's too late at this point. Like I think it's already a joke as it is, and it's lost a lot of luster as it is. So yeah, I don't know.
it's tough. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we'd have to go all the way back in. Like, I don't think there's a way to wind back the clock at this point. But again, I think for as much as steroids were part of like an era for like 15, 20 years that we know
Mm.
of like really strongly, but also like a good 10 or 15 years where the steroids just got much, much, much better
Mm.
and much more difficult to test for
Mm.
and hidden and all that stuff. And so we saw a spike. We saw guys, go back to like a lot of guys go to the Dominican for the summer, come back, gaining 15, 20 pounds, hitting the ball 20 feet further. And then next thing you know, they're getting monstrous contracts. Like we saw a lot of that. Like there's all kinds of things that are going on here but I just don't think you can just say, hey, we just again, excuse it all. And it's okay. All of that's okay. And then like try to get back to the basics. I don't know. And again, I think that's why baseball is like it's on its way out because you allowed something. And the NFL might allow, I mean, it looks like,
Jimmy G's on the juice now.
oh
Well,
yeah,
allegedly. He got caught on the juice. I
allegedly.
don't know if he's on now. He was on very recently on the juice.
Yeah, yeah. And he went out, well, and even NFL,
It didn't work.
they barely mess with guys. They're like, you get two games. Like
He was on the juice and he got worse. What happened with my boy Jimmy, man?
He went to Tristan Thompson's guy.
Oh, Tristan Thompson was on the juice too. I forgot.
Oh,
Didn't help
yeah.
him.
Yeah. Yeah. Who
Oh,
was
man.
the one guy? I think was it Danny Ferry that got caught like in the 2000s for juicing, and everyone's like, really? Really?
Has there ever been any Kings that have been caught for juicing? I don't think so, huh?
Oh, I don't know. Not that I can remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, but I also don't, it's like, I mean, it used to be the joke, when I first started covering the team, it's like, the whole marijuana policy or, hey, we're doing random drug testing today. Jimmer, let's go. And like, at some point, Jimmer's like, how come I'm the only one who's peeing in a cup? Like, what is happening here? And they're like, all right, Jimmer, like, we got to go again. So
David Garcia brings up a good point. De'Aaron Fox was loosely accused. Remember when he took the picture of him on his I think it was him working out. He took the picture, put it on Instagram, and then the next day he was like, "Oh, I had to take a drug test today. The NBA made me take a drug test today."
Yeah, anytime you do anything where it's like, oh, look how buff he is, like, Buddy Hield, like sitting there flinging the ropes, like, yeah, go Buddy. And then it's like, hey, randomly, I was tested today. Yeah.
Go
So,
gang.
and people mentioning Tyreek Evans. That is not why
That was
Tyreek
not
Evans.
performance enhancing. No.
No. So,
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? We can talk about aside from that disaster that took place in the nation's capital last night.
I don't know. I thought, we could do a whole segment on Zach and Kelly Kapowski and, like AC Slater and
I'm
it
all
was,
in. I'm not a fan of
yeah.
AC Slaters anymore.
Yeah, no, not at
Yeah,
all.
his company. I don't like his company.
Is AC Slater like the character of you guys' generation? Who's like the guy?
Zach, I was Zach.
Oh yeah, Zach Morris. He is a dude.
Zach was way cooler than AC.
Oh yeah.
AC was a hater.
Yeah, plus he had so many like ridiculous, like didn't he call like Jesse, didn't call her mama all the time? Like there were so many things you're like, oh, this is weird. Like all of it's weird. Like, oh, don't do that, mama. Like what? Your high school girlfriend, you're calling mama? What is happening?
They did call her mama. That was his nickname for Jesse Spano.
That's
but
right.
nah, man, the Kings. Wow. I gotta admit, James, I didn't see it coming, man. I didn't I'm not saying they're above losing to teams that they're better than statistically. But if anything, looking at this trip, I thought it would have been the Raptors game instead of the Wizards game. Man, and once they got past the Raptors the way they did, I didn't see this coming. I didn't think this was going to happen.
They almost make you feel like somebody who just keeps falling off the wagon. Like, well, I had a moment of weakness and 6 vodka tonics. That's what it kind of, you know what I mean? It kind of feels like every time you start to believe in somebody, then you can't. And for me, from here on out, like, I'm not going to put anything past them one way or another.
Yeah.
Like, I would like to like for years, like the finger on the pulse of this team, and you kind of knew what was going to happen. You knew that even you'd walk into a day and think, they have no business winning this game tonight, but I think they are going to win. And then they'd come out and they beat somebody, and you'd be like, I kind of figured that one. You could see the bounce in their step. You could see but now at this point, like, I don't know what to make of it, because it's like every fourth game, every fifth game, even again, here they had an opportunity to win 3 straight, have momentum going into Orlando, momentum potentially going into Philadelphia, and then these 2 huge games that are hanging out against Dallas next week. And, I told Kyle today on the Insiders, like, look, I could easily see this team beating the Mavericks twice and turning around and losing to Utah 2 days later. Like, that's just it's who they are, and I would love to say that they've grown or they've figured it out, but like right away last night, I watched them play and was like, "Oh no, here we go again." And like, I don't even felt like they saw the "here we go again." They just couldn't wake up. They couldn't start playing, and it's again, like Mike talked about this with the 3-point shooting, right? Like, or the 3-point shooting defense. Like, hey, I'll change the schematics, and I'll change the system when they show me that they can actually run the system that I'm telling them to run, right? That's what he said. Like, if they were doing what we were asking, then I would say, hey, look, that's it's not working. We tried it and it didn't work, but that wasn't what was happening. And all of a sudden, again, the Kings are 15th in the league in defensive rating. Since the All-Star break, they're like almost top 10, I think.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel the same way about, like, I know a lot of people want to pile on like, oh, well, his coaching. And well, first of all, he doesn't have anyone to turn to at all. Like, there's no one left. He's missing 3 rotational pieces in Kevin Huerter, Sasha Vezenkov, and Trey Lyles. And whether Sasha is a full rotational player or not, he's down. He's down a few rungs, and the Kings still walked into this season with like 4 pieces on the roster that you really aren't going to play. And maybe even a 5th that's joined the starting lineup now that you didn't expect to play major minutes. But I kind of feel the same way going into these games. Like, I would like to say that Mike Brown just got out coached and that the game plan was bad and, the scout wasn't great. And that's not what you see. Like, we watch it from the moment they step on the floor, where you're like, oh boy, like they don't have any juice, and it's not a schematic issue. It's not a, did you make the right rotation issue? It's none of that. It's, are you going to shoot 10 for 40 from 3? Or are you going to shoot 17 for 40? And we don't know it until they get out there. And so, again, I would like to tell you that there was something wrong with the schematic last night, and there's something, like, they just did something with the scheme, and they play, it was somebody else's fault. But that's just not, like, we've been taught now that that's not the problem. This is a problem that this team has with showing up and being consistent and giving the right effort on certain nights.
And last night, like I continue to say, I'm not trying to put lipstick on this pig. I'm not. It was everything about losing to the Wizards is awful. It's awful. Like, I'm not trying to do that. But I will also just ask the question. Last night, you talk about they don't have it and it's not there tonight. Is it a little understandable with the whole back-to-back situation and what they did? Like, not that they shouldn't have won, but not having that same energy, is that a little understandable? Once again, the good teams, even if you don't have the energy, you find a way to win the game. So I'm not excusing the loss. I'm just saying, like, oh man, I'm a little sluggish tonight. We're a little sluggish tonight. We got to do something different to find a way to win or something like that. But not having the energy is what I'm at. Is that a little bit understandable?
Yeah, so it's kind of what Michael's saying here. No juice because they were scheduled a BS back-to-back towards the end of the season. Every team in the league is going through the same schedules. Everybody is doing the same thing. And sure, there are a lot of teams that are doing exactly what the Kings are doing. That doesn't matter. Like, these guys have been playing back-to-backs for their entire careers. Like, this isn't new. De'Aaron Fox was drafted in 2017. That's 7 years ago. Like, he knows what a back-to-back feels like.
Mhm.
Harrison Barnes knows a back-to-back. Domantas Sabonis, they understand a back-to-back. So, no, and, like, look, it's a back-to-back against 2 really bad teams, one of which you blew out, and your starters didn't even play major minutes. So, I get that it's not easy to get through customs and take your private jet down to Washington, D.C. from Toronto and, try to, get off your 5-star plane to your 5-star hotel. Like, yeah, there's going to be energy issues sometime, but that's when you got to find it. You got to dig down deep and say, no, 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 no. We can't keep doing this. Because I mean, if that's the case, then explain to me what the 73 win Warriors team did. Explain to me what, the Boston Celtics are going to do this year, where they're going to like win 60 plus. Like, I just don't think it's a great excuse. And I'll also tell you, like, when for the first like 5 or 6 years, maybe even 7 years, I covered the league, like, there were 4 games in 5 nights. You'd have a back-to-back, a day off, and another back-to-back, and then a day off, and then another game. You're playing 5 games in 7 nights. They don't have those anymore. Like, the worst you're going to face is 3 games in 4 nights. And sure, maybe this was 3 games in 4 nights with a couple of days of travel in there, but man,
I,
that's a worst team in basketball, and there's not even a question about it. That was the most unserious team in basketball you just played and lost to.
I would say, real quick, because we got to take a break, but I would say, James, they tried to do everything you could. They didn't succeed because they got down, and they dig deep and try to fight back. Got down again, dig deep, try to fight back. They just dug themselves a little bit too much of a hole at the start of the game. There's a couple other things I want to ask you, including Malik Monk and Mike Brown. We'll get into all of that when we come back on D-Lo and KC. It's James Ham of the Insiders of the Kings Beat right here on D-Lo and KC on ESPN 1320. James, I'll be right back.
Sweet. What's going on, people? Kenny's going to bust into the Fortress of Snackitude. Wait for it. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think, again, like I see in here that Domas got outplayed by Rashawn Holmes. He gave up 16 rebounds to Rashawn Holmes, but look at Rashawn Holmes' shooting percentage and everything else. Like, no. Like, you had a point guard shoot 30 times, and some of those shots should have gone to Domas. You should have tried to get easy buckets near the rim against a team that had one center and no one else. Like, I know that sort of the freewheeling offense is just to push and push and push the tempo and get up and down, and there is no time for Mike to call play while the team is running, from one end of the court to the next. So I get that, but like at a certain point, as players on the court, you need to adjust and make sure that you're going to the dudes that can score at the rim. Secure into Yahoo, 6 turnovers for Sabonis. I think the Kings are like 6-0 when he has 6 turnovers. When he has like 9 and 11, they lose. But we did this exercise one day, and it's something ridiculous. So I don't want to, again, it's not a good thing for him to turn the ball over, but it's also sort of the nature of the beast. You have a guy who, they run every single offensive possession through. And to be honest, they should have ran more possessions through him last night. I would have liked to have seen him in the 2-man game. Turnovers on the season: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 games with a turnover. The Kings are with 6 turnovers. The Kings are 6-1 in those games, and then they're 0-2 when he goes 9 and 11 turnovers. So I don't understand that anomaly either. That's just a weird stat. Let me see. James, do you think that Fox not scoring as much at the beginning of the year indicative of the length of the season? Yeah, I mean, like, look, is he running out of juice a little bit? Sure, but it's part of the maturation process. You know, we talk about it with Keegan. We talk about it even last year with Fox. Fox had some roller coaster ride stuff. BS. I don't know if there was post game last night. I haven't seen any videos posted either. They were on the road, and to be honest with you, I believe Chris Biederman is on this trip, and Chris isn't big into recording videos and putting them up. It's just, it's not what he does. And I don't blame him, because when he's out on the road and there's no one else but him, it's all proprietary, your technology, your information. Like, nobody else has access to it. So you can write countless stories that are yours, that no one else can steal your quotes. So yeah, if I were on the road, I would probably, and I was the only one there, how I would handle that, I would take the video, but then I would process the video after I wrote 2 or 3 stories, and I'd use the video as an accompaniment to the story, because it's my information. It's one of the reasons why I'm not writing a whole bunch of long form stuff right now, because it's impossible to get anything that that somebody else isn't recording. So even that right there, King's YouTube has a video. Does King's YouTube ask a single question? Do the Kings ask a single question? I'm going to guess no. Like, they're on the ground person. Maybe I'm wrong, but most likely somebody is following Chris Biederman around the locker room and just recording his interview and then stealing his intellectual property and putting it out there, and then saying, well, it's our locker room, so we can do what we want. So it's complicated. Now it's become like a race to see who can get just the video up the quickest. It's like, all right. And I take a little bit extra time to square fit it and logo it. And then I also spend a little bit of time, because I'm using cinematic mode, which is like full HD. I don't even know what the conversation is about Alcatraz. I think they did, because it doesn't seem that far away. I'm not a good swimmer, but
we came to the conclusion that they did get away.
yeah, there are like 3, right?
Yeah. Well, what was it? Was it 2 that got away, and then the third one is Allen, isn't it?
No, it was 4. It's dummy boy Allen who didn't make it. And then 3 escaped. 1 died, and I think the 2 were brothers, and they survived.
Did they get caught again?
No, they made it to
No.
Brazil or somewhere in South America.
They said they sent postcards. No, and then one story had them dressing up as women to their mother's funeral.
Yeah, the sister said they did that, I think.
Yeah.
That's not weird.
Here we go. It's a Friday, baby. Here on D-Lo and KC. Major Friday vibes. This Friday vibes. It's been a little bit more button up. When you say, Jesse, a little more button up on this Friday.
Yeah, if the Kings didn't lose yesterday.
Yeah. Nobody's happy. Nobody's in the mood for jokes today. That's the other thing about this. James Ham of the Insiders of the Kings Beat here with me, as D-Lo is out on assignment. That's how we should say. He's out on assignment right now. Not really. He's just not in today. Enjoying himself, having a good time like he should. So a couple of things, man. First of all, let's salute Domantas Sabonis. 52nd consecutive double-double. He's still in line to get to tie Kevin Love on Saturday, and he would break the all-time or modern since the merger record. He would break Kevin Love's record Monday at home at the Golden One Center. So at least we have that. Still a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. Again, people can beat on Sabonis for having a game like last night where he wasn't as impactful. But I mean, if you can get 14, 14, and 6 out of your center, like, sure, he shot 6 of 9 from the field. What is that, like 66% from the field?
That's really
66.7? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Like, for me, I don't get like, there are limitations to every player, and Domas does about everything that he can on almost any given night. If he could have had anyone hit a three-point shot, he would have had a triple-double. I mean, there's no question about that. And then if they would have hit anything from the perimeter, then Washington would not have been able to double team him every single time he touched the ball. So you have to understand, like, all of these things play into them, play into each other. And sure, I think the Kings should have featured Sabonis more down the stretch, but a guy who is this consistent, who, what is it, 3 or 4 games the entire season hasn't had a double double.
It's crazy.
Like, it's absolutely wild to see a player be this consistently good on a team that's completely inconsistent.
Yeah, I would have liked for him to take more than 9 shots last night. There's a number of different reasons for that, but I mean, last night was just a frustrating loss. I really think, and I say this often with this team, but they had opportunities last night. They had opportunities. The Wizards, I mentioned it earlier. This wasn't the Spurs game that they narrowly beat San Antonio with. This wasn't Chicago, where they blew the lead. And Chicago and DeRozan and Kobe Bryant were hitting everything in that fourth quarter. This wasn't Miami where Jaime Jaquez was hitting everything. That's not what this was. Washington was not on fire for much of that second half. They weren't hitting a bunch of shots. There was opportunities there, and the Kings would get opportunities back, wide open looks, just couldn't knock them down. And that's pretty frustrating. They almost and should have diverted disaster, and they weren't able to last night.
Yeah, it's one of those games where you kept thinking, well, they don't deserve to win the game, but they probably still will. And then they didn't. And you're like, okay, well, they deserve to lose that game. That's exactly the thought process I had when I got done with it. Like, yeah, they fully deserve to lose that game. And, like, we can point to a couple other things. Like, again, Keegan Murray had 8 points in the first quarter and then had a 2-pointer in the late third to get to 10, and then had 2 threes in the fourth to get to 16. It's like, man, I got to have more than 7-11 when you're cooking. But at the same time, I can tell you that Kyle Kuzma, like, manhandled him quite a few times. And it wasn't great. Like, you had to figure Keegan he did not play to his standard on the defensive end last night. And so you have all of these pieces where you're like, okay, I could have used more Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes didn't hit a 3. He goes 0 for 2. At the same time, he got to the free throw line and shot, 5 of 6 from the line. And it's like, okay, I needed more. I needed more free throw attempts from you. Slow the game down. If your team is beat up and tired, then, like, go get high percentage shots. And that's the thing that I just felt like this team didn't do. Like, they just kept settling. And it was a sign of, again, a tired team, an exhausted team. But, like, nobody's crying a song for you here. You got to go out and play. And you're playing against a team that had 11 wins. Like, and not like 11 and 18 or something. They're 11 and 58 coming into the game. Something like that. This is like,
Yeah, it's terrible.
it's
They're
a
all
joke of a team. It's a team that doesn't care, like,
right.
most nights. One of the worst defensive teams we've seen. What are they giving up? Like 123 points a night, and you score 102. So yeah, it's tough. They did not rely on their basics. They definitely regressed to, like, who they are as basketball players in this game, and that's, guys who shoot, a bunch of jump shots and stuff like that. They did not stay to their principles, especially on the offensive end, which would have carried them through.
Yeah, I thought last night, De'Aaron Fox, he took 30 shots, 15 of them threes. There was a couple things going on there, in my opinion. Number one, I think he knew he didn't have the legs, and that's where you get the 15 threes from. You're just I just don't have a good feeling. This is just my thought, but I don't have a good feeling with my legs tonight. I'm not feeling bouncy. But I got to get them up. Let me get this 3 up. And in the fourth quarter, I think he had 13 points in the fourth quarter, 5 of 9. A lot of those 5 came earlier in the fourth quarter and couldn't bring it home. But I know a lot of people were upset with him taking 30 shots. and mainly 15 threes and all this other stuff. And I get that. I understand it. But I think it got to a point in that game where he was doing what he could to try and escape DC with the win. And I understand that. If you've taken 23 shots in the third quarter, now's not the time to be like, oh man, I better only take 3 more shots because I can't be taking more than 26. Man, get him up. And I saw him last night trying. They're all the whole time they're trying to trying to avoid disaster. And I think that's what happened a lot with De'Aaron in that fourth quarter, where he was getting them up. He had 9 shots in that fourth quarter, but unfortunately they weren't able to avoid the disastrous loss to the Wizards.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like look, he started 0 of 9 from the field. And so if you take away the 0 for 9, which is not something that we get to do, but if you just say, okay, what did he do the rest of the game? You're okay with him shooting what 10 of 21.
Mm.
That's fine. And so maybe he did feel like he found himself, but there was way too much settling. And, again, I don't know how many times I need to hear Mike Brown talk about paint touches and spray threes. Like that's your game plan, and you didn't do it. You did not do that at all. A lot of the shots were off the bounce. Like again, I can understand Fox trying to will his team to victory. But there was also like a happy medium there where you're like, okay, do I have it? Or do I not have it? And I don't ever have a problem with Fox shooting 30 shots as long as it's like within the flow and it makes sense, right? I just don't know that last night's game really was the right one to shoot 30 shots. Like you should have been able to distribute the wealth a little bit, especially when early on you didn't have it. So you should have taken a little bit of a step back. And I know he's trying to again will his team to victory because I thought he was. Like
Mhm.
I don't think he was just trying to be selfish and like me. He just kind of had that like singular mindset that he was going to try to get them back in the game. I don't. What I don't ever want to see is again, he can take 30 shots all the time, anytime he wants. But if he's going to take 30 shots, he better be scoring 40 something, and he better be hitting 17 of them. And that's kind of the way it goes. Like if you're going to be that guy, that type of volume, then it's got to be on a heater. It can't be taking 30 shots to score 25 points. That's not a good ratio ever.
No, but that's where I talk about in the winning time in that fourth quarter. You don't worry about that. If they need me to score 27 and I got to take 47 to get there, but that's going to get us the win, so be it. And I think that's where his mind was. He wasn't worried about I got to take these. I've already taken this amount of shots, trying to get the win. That the whole fourth quarter, they were trying to escape DC, and they couldn't escape it with the victory.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And then, we have the situation late in the game too, where Malik Monk, like,
Yeah.
look, I'm okay with Malik Monk losing his cool right there. And I'm okay with Mike Brown losing his cool as well. Those guys cared. They wanted to win. And I think, we have it's like the buddy comedy of Monk and Fox, right?
Mhm.
At some point in a game like that, I need Malik to go over and say, hey man, like it might not be your night and we need to do this a different way tonight. And I know that De'Aaron has been more than willing to do that this season. But sometimes it has to be pointed out, and it has to be pointed out by your peers. And so whoever had to do it in that game, it's like, look, man, we got to get more Demonis Sabonis 2-man game. We got to get more pick and rolls to the basket. We've got to find Harrison on a post up or on a dribble drive to get to the line again to slow this thing down and try to give us a break, sort of just in the action, so you can take a breather on the second night of a back to back. And so there has to be, there are different ways to use the word accountability, but like in the moment, you have to be able to say, hey, look, here are the receipts. And we need to do something different here to try to get this thing finished. Now, if you get hot, we're going to feed you. But if not, like we need to try something different because it's not working. And I think self-regulation is the best type of regulation. And this team is still going through that. But again, I would point to like last week when De'Aaron and Domas stepped aside and let let Malik Monk do his magic, not only in the fourth quarter, but in the overtime session in that big win that they had. And I would like to see more of that where somebody else is saying, hey, look, we have to do this differently. Or having a player go, okay, they have to embrace what's happening in a game and go towards that. And again, when are they going to do that for Keegan? Like, and it's because Keegan's not saying it. He's not saying, hey, man, I need the ball. And until he does, you're going to keep seeing games like this where he shoots 7 of 11 from the field and everyone's wanting more from him. And, again, the second and third quarter is basically non-existent on the court.
Let me ask you a little bit. You touched on it, and we've been talking about it throughout the day. And you've been around NBA players way longer than I have. The Malik Monk, Mike Brown situation. I always say I don't like it, right? Like, I don't like that. But I'm also coming from a point of view of being a high school coach and being a high school player, being a college coach and a college player, an AAU coach and an AAU player. That's a completely different world than the NBA. And I concede to that, and I recognize that. I don't like it, but is that something that typically it happened? Because this is the second time we've seen it in a week. Something like that happened with those two. Is that something that, hey, it's just the NBA, no big deal? They say love each other, so we leave it at that? Or is it something that, either one of them? Because Mike kind of went at Malik too, where somebody should pull him aside, like, hey guys, let's not do this, at least in public. Like, if you guys want to have it out in the locker room, cool, but let's not do this on the bench and all this other stuff.
I would take the opposite approach because I think there is sort of, in some of these losses for the Kings, there's a complacency aspect that is really frustrating for fans to watch. They don't understand the lack of emotion, the lack of physicality, the lack of energy. I think that sometimes the fans need to see that stuff does happen, that this team does yell and scream at each other on occasion and does try to hold each other accountable in certain situations. And if it's always behind closed doors and we never really hear about it, you kind of get this feeling that oh, well, I just don't know how much they care. And they care. Mike Brown cares. Malik Monk cares. De'Aaron Fox cares. Domantas Sabonis. These guys, they fully care. They don't always. They're not able to show their emotions in a way that some people would like them to.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm okay, man. Malik is a fiery player. You want him in order to be great. What he does on the court, it requires him to have a certain amount of fire underneath him and a certain amount of passion. And passionate people, sometimes they snap, they yell back. We always joke around about me popping off at people and stuff. And look, I'm a passionate guy. I'm a very, very fiery guy. When I'm super competitive, there's no question. Do I yell at coaches? No, probably not. But have I yelled at a ref? Have I yelled at an opposing player? Have I yelled at a teammate? Sure. That's part of being in a sport and having being a personality like that in a sport, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm okay with it. And again, I'm okay with it spilling because I think if you're watching that game as a Kings fan, and a lot of people shut it off long before that because they were just disgusted and frustrated, and to be honest, pissed, angry, disappointed, all of those things. But if you see the end of that and you're like, okay, well, good. I'm not the only one who feels that way. Malik Monk feels that way, and Mike Brown firing right back at him. Okay, they're not just taking this as "No, another loss, no big deal. We'll get the next one, guys. It's cool." No, show me some passion, show me some fire, show me that you flat out care. And so I'm okay with all of it.
So I'll have the counter to the counter, the masking to the masking, just like the steroids era. And I would say, with all due respect to myself and everybody out there, who cares about what the fans want to see? If that's not good for the team, I don't need to see it. So if they're good, then fine. But if stuff like that, like for instance, if I'm not saying this happens, I'm just throwing an example. If Keegan Murray is sitting there, here goes Monk and Mike again, and that leads to that type of, I don't care that the fans see passion or not. That's not good for, if it's not good for the locker room, we don't need to see it.
No, but what I'm telling you is you see that stuff in the locker room. Like these guys know. These guys know who they're around. You know, like just like again, no one wants to talk about like you don't have a bunch of guys going on the record about what it was like to be in the locker room with DeMarcus Cousins. Like what we saw on the court was a microcosm of what they saw in the locker room, what they saw in practice. And like there are a lot of players who walk away. And you know, we talked about it the other day about like the Spurs, right? Like there are players that just flat out won't talk about their experience with the Spurs because it wasn't fun. They did not have a good time. They felt like as basketball players they weren't allowed to be who they wanted to be, or that they were, you know, run through drills and like too hard or whatever it might be. Like so like look, I get it. I get what you're saying that, you know, there could be some players, but this isn't like a malcontent who's doing this stuff all day long every day and, you know, throwing temper tantrums and breaking stuff, and like half the locker room's just sitting there like what in the world is going on, and another half of the locker room's going, oh, that's just him, that's what he does. Like I think we just saw it bleed out onto the court a little bit with Monk, and again I want that kind of fire from not all of my players but certain types of players, and Malik is one of those players that like, look, in order to throw down those dunks that he throws down, you got to have something cooking inside. Like
Yeah.
you just flat out do. And you know, I think lastly on that, Paul Westphal told me years ago with regards to DeMarcus Cousins that he would always much rather try to find a way to tame the flame inside of a player than try to build a flame. Because if you got somebody who's just like blasé and doesn't have that fire and doesn't have that passion, that energy, there's no way to put it, to instill it in them. And like again, that's Monk, and that's Mike too. Like Mike is a passionate dude. Sometimes Mike needs to show that too. That, you know, he's there. Like what's Mike supposed to do in that game? Yell at an official? I
I
don't think the
love,
officials had anything to do with the win and loss in that game.
I love Malik. I love Malik. Ain't nothing changed. I love Malik. That's my guy. I love Mike Brown. That's my
Yeah.
guy too. I would say, like Kanye once said in the back in the day, I ain't letting everybody in our family business. That's how I go about it. But you know, whatever happens, they just need to find a way to get a win on Saturday in Orlando. We'll be back on Monday